Hi there. This is part 2 of the series on Delphi records. We're looking at making a movie database using records. This is going to be the console version. So, this is going to be the console version. In other words, we're going to be making this in a version that doesn't use Delphi's forms. We're going to use the virtual programming lab that forms part of your website. You go along to the website, you'll find VPL records, a movie database, and the questions are essentially the same as the Delphi version. As you progress, you're going to learn about functions and procedures and making subroutines in which you can stash little pieces of code to do specific functions in exactly the same way as the version that you have in Delphi does, where every button becomes its own little subroutine with its own little procedure. In the website version, we can also create functions and procedures, but initially for this version, because you haven't yet learnt that, we're going to go really old school and do this as one single procedural piece of code. So, let's have a look at the exercise. This is what we're given. It's essentially the same question as the Delphi version. You're going to be constructing a record with a title, genre, year, and length. And you're going to be loading this file, mock-movie-data-csv. What you've been given is a starter program, which has very little in it, just one user's line that loads the system utilities unit, and then the same data file that you have in the Delphi version. Go to Edit. And this loads the editor. You'll find the two files on the screen. There's mock movie database and there is movie data CSV. To make it a little bit easier, I'm going to make that full screen so that you can see what's going on a little bit better. Remember that records are defined in the type section of your program. The starter program doesn't include the keyword type, so we're going to have to add it. Right, type. And exactly as I did in the Delphi version, tmovie equals record, and it's going to contain a title, and it's going to contain a genre, and both of those are strings. Also going to have length and year. And because I'm trying to do this in the same way that I did the Delphi version, I'm going to make those integers as well. Right, that creates our basic record. Now, like with the Delphi version, I have to create a global variable for the array that's going to hold our movie database. So, var we'll make the same size of array and just like I had in the Delphi version, tmovie. So that you can compare this and see how what we're doing now compares to what we did in Delphi, I'm going to open up the Delphi version in the sidebar next to the screen, and you can see what we're doing. So in the Delphi version, you'll see we created a record, which we named movie rec, and then we used an array 1,000 entries of tmovie rec. In the console version, we've got just tmovies. I'm going to name it tmovie rec for consistency. There we go, tmovie rec with a title, genre, year, and length, and our array with 1,000 entries. Delphi version, we also created a record length variable to store the length, number of items in this database. We're going to do the same thing here. Record length integer. Now where these two differ, Delphi version, we have separate procedures for each operation to display a formatted message, list all the movies, and to load the file. And in our console version, we're going to have to do all of that in one long procedure. So what we're going to be doing is exactly the same thing. load the file. I'm still going to need my text file variable. I'm also still going to use sign file, read line, reset, while not end of file. The actual code to manipulate the data stays the same between the two different environments. So let's begin. Let's add our text file connector, file variable, and we can do exactly the same tests. File's name was mock movie data. Only I spelt it with a K in this particular version, so let's make sure that we use the correct name. We can't use show message, I'll have to just output to the console, so right line, file not found. And now we can assume that the file exists, so we can carry on as normal. Find file. The one thing you are going to have to be careful of in this particular environment is in the web page, this is running on a Unix system rather than a Windows system, and that means that the file system names are actually case sensitive. I've got to use exactly the same case in the name as I've got on the screen. As soon as I change something, that would work in the Windows version running on Delphi. On this version running in Free Pascal, I'm going to have to make sure that my case stays the same. And exactly the same, while not file. The data has exactly the same problem as the data on the Windows system. We've got a set of titles at the top, so I'm going to tell Delphi, in this case Pascal, to skip that. Right, we're going to need this variable to store these values. So I know from the Delphi version I'm going to need a counter. I'm also going to need a variable to store the line that I read from the file. I'll also need something to contain position when I'm doing my pos copy delete to extract particular fields from that line of text. Read line, con into S line, set my counter to a useful starting value. Remember, my array starts at 1 in this particular instance. And then we do the same pos copy delete as we have in the Delphi version. So far, if you look to the right, you'll see that our code is looking pretty much the same. The only thing that's different is I have right line, console version, and in the Delphi version, I've got show message. This one was going to become genre. The next one was going to become year. And again, I'm going to have to do the string to int. That's the routine that's provided by sysutils. And in this one, remember, I was going to have to split the length, still indicated as hours and minutes. I have to split that. I have to create that variable. Now we can finally, after I delete the hours from the line, I can add everything together again. So S hours times 60, that we're going to have to convert to an integer. Plus string to int what's left in this line. Finally, when done, increment count. We can make sure we put this in the next record. And once our whole routine is finished, go. I'm going to maximize the screen so you can see the whole code there in front of you. And you'll see that that is very similar to what we have the Delphi version. Where this is going to divert slightly is what's going to happen now. The Delphi version would complete this code and execute it as the form is created. See from the Delphi one, I've left out closing the file. It's always polite to close the door behind you. What I can't do in the version that I'm doing Programming Lab yet is place my code to list everything in a separate function. You will be able to do that once you've learned about creating your own functions and procedures. It means the code to display list, I'm now going to have to add directly beneath this line. So we're going to go right back to the beginning. We're going to do exactly the same thing as we have in Delphi. I'm going to use that same counter. We use that variable. And we're going to carry on and display, find the correct function, and display everything that we've got. So I'll be reusing S-line. I'll be reusing the counter. S-line, using the counter. Right. So for TNT equals 1, 2. We're using that record length, which restores the number of items in our array. 2. N. I'll build my line. The tab character stays the same in both versions. And then we add genre. Building this on top of what's already in this line. add year, and remember year again is a integer, so we're going to convert that to a string. And we have the length as well, which is also an integer. Right, that constructs our line, and now we need to display the output. Right line. That will display the output on the console. And the for loop. One difference between the two environments is Delphi is very friendly. It completes your begin and ends for you, and console application here does not. So let's give this a test and see how it works. Execute. And I see our error is identifier not found, S hours. I forgot to create that particular variable. So let's put that in, save it, and give it a whirl. And there we are. Console output of all the movies. The last option is we want to be able to have someone search for a particular movie and then it displays particular details. So let's add that here at the end. All right, we're going to just add a blank line. And now I need to get our movie. Which I'll put in a variable called movie title. Let's create a movie title quickly. And this is again going to be the same search routine as we used in our Delphi version. Delphi version did that, as you can see on the sidebar. We've got while, and we're stopping at record length if the movie doesn't exist. We're going to show a message, movie not found, or we're going to display a result. We're not going to put it in a rich edit, of course. We're going to display this on the console, but otherwise it is the same routine. So, set our counter back to 1. And while they are movies, count different title is different to you're looking for, which is movie title. Alright, that's going to carry on until we find the title, but we must also take into account someone may type something wrong, or the title that they're looking for may not exist in the database, so we're going to have that particular option. And int is less than record length. And this will now stop when we reach the end of the list. With 2 potential stopping points, I must now check to see that I did actually find the movie. Copy this option. Spelling is important. Exit. So in the remaining space, we do what we do when the movie has been found. And the same thing for, move it up so you can see, same thing for the other 2 options, genre, year, and length. Remembering that year, again, you have to enter string. That's year. There we're done. Save this and display again. See what happens. Movie title, spelling, enter name of movie, Lucy, and there are the details of Lucy. What happens if the movie is not in the list? Let's run this again. And look, there we go. So, apart from some minor differences, if you have a look at the Delphi version, the minor differences are just that we're not using the form controls. The actual fundamental programming is the same between the 2. That routine in the Delphi version is our search routine that finds the information. Exactly the same thing. My counter name is different, but this finds the information in the console version. Likewise, Delphi version, we have this routine to display all the movies, doing exactly the same thing in console version. The only difference is where the stuff gets output. So there you go. I do hope you enjoyed that. See you again next time. Bye for now.